I thought inheriting the family vineyard meant a peaceful retirement. I didn't know my wife had been poisoning it, literally and figuratively, for years, planning to sell my family's legacy out from under me. I remember the day she first arrived on the property, trailing rose petals behind her like a welcome banner. She was beautiful in that luminous, almost unreal way, her dark hair coiled like silk, her eyes bright with ambition. She claimed she loved the vineyard as much as I did, professing that our shared dream was to elevate the grapes to international fame. I was smitten by her confidence. It felt as though the vineyard itself breathed a sigh of relief, delighted to have someone to share its burdens. Together, we toured every corner of the land, terrace slopes dotted with wildflowers, the ancient stone cellars where the cool air held a faint musk of oak barrels, and she seemed to soak it all in, hanging on my every explanation about soil pH, canopy management, and barrel aging. In those early months, I'd catch her standing at sunset, her profile framed by the golden hills, and I'd swear she looked happier than I'd ever seen anyone. She made me think that maybe this place needed her as much as I did. Yet beneath her words, there was always a hint of something else, a fleeting hesitation, a subtle shift in tone whenever I spoke of succession. She'd nod politely when I declared that the vineyard would pass to me alone, that it was my birthright, but I felt the corners of her mouth tighten each time I said it. I brushed it aside as mere nerves. After all, she adored me, didn't she? Or so I believed. Our dates took on a new rhythm. Strolls through the sunlit vineyard at midday, dinners in the cellar lit by flickering lanterns, and quiet mornings in the guest house overlooking the rows of vines. She would sip a glass of young vintage and murmur, "I can't wait for the day we truly call this ours." And I, flush with pride, would agree. I first sensed trouble last autumn, when our harvest yielded half the tonnage I'd forecast. Already, drought had battered the vines, but smart canopy management and deep root irrigation had saved the season before. This time, the numbers didn't add up. I pored over reports late into the night, crunching soil samples and irrigation logs, hunting for any anomaly. The sensors reported normal moisture levels, yet whole sections of Cabernet had withered to brittle twigs. It was as if someone had slipped a silent killer through the roots. When I asked her, she laughed it off. "Vineyards have moods," she said, tracing a finger along the rim of her glass. "Some years they give you lemons instead of grapes." I tried to smile, but the tightness in her eyes told a different story. She volunteered to help oversee the next round of soil tests, yet I noticed she'd moved the sampling station near the old well, despite my objections. "The water there is pure," she said. A month later, the new tests showed an unnatural spike in mineral salts, salt levels that would stunt growth and corrode root systems over time. "Maybe we should drill a new well," I suggested, trying to hide the undercurrent of alarm in my voice. She brushed it off, offering instead to negotiate with the neighboring estate for additional water rights. She handled the talks, charming their manager into a temporary swap agreement. But every morning, when I walked the ridges to check the water pumps, I found the standby well inexplicably shut off, the valve closed with a padlock she alone had the key to. By winter, whispers had begun among the staff. I overheard Marco, my foreman, muttering something about strange deliveries and midnight tinkering. I dismissed it. Late nights in a vineyard are not unusual as long as the work's being done. But when I cornered him, he fell silent, eyes darting. "Nothing," he insisted. "Just routine maintenance." He wouldn't meet my gaze. It was the same day I found the ledger. I'd gone down to the big oak desk in my study to review annual expenses. The ledger lay open, pages sticky with spilled wine, but I blinked when a small line caught my eye. "Private testing, 22,000 euros. No notation. Beneath it, collateral control, 17,500 euros. Both in her neat handwriting. There were more entries. Operational adjustment, staff diversion, asset revaluation, each obscured by vague phrasing but summing to far more than I'd ever authorized. My stomach slid into cold stones. I shut the ledger and leaned against the desk, heart pounding. She had access to the books, of course. After all, she insisted on helping with budgets. But these sums seemed about too many zeros, too many secrets. That night, I asked her over dinner. We sat in the cellar room, where vines formed a lacework of shadows on the walls. Candlelight flickered, and she wore her most elegant black dress, the deep V-neck kissed by the glow. "Marina," I said, my voice heavy, "what are these expenses?" I slid the ledger across the table. Her smile faltered for a heartbeat, just a quiet tremor. Then she steeled herself. "Just some investments to improve efficiency," she said, voice smooth. "You know how competitive the market is." "Investments?" The single word echoed against those ancient stones. "Yes." She reached a hand toward mine. "You trust me, don't you?" Her eyes glistened. I wanted to believe her lie. I wanted to let her kiss chase the knot out of my chest. But deep down, something in me recoiled. She couldn't meet my gaze. She'd turned the key on the well. She'd rerouted deliveries. The ledger, those figures, were too deliberate. I withdrew my hand. "Show me," I said. She leaned back, graceful as a cat, and gave me another practiced smile. "Not tonight," she whispered. "I'm tired. Let's talk about this tomorrow." I left her there, nursing a half-finished glass of Bordeaux, as I slipped away to my study. I pulled out the ledger and the legal documents from my safe, our prenuptial agreement, the vineyard deed, the list of my personal accounts. If she was stealing from me, I needed counsel. My lawyer, Stefano, was a family friend I'd known since I was a boy. He practiced out of a small office in town, its shelves lined with dusty tomes and faded certificates. When he saw my face as I entered, he motioned me to a chair and poured me an espresso. "What's wrong, Luca?" he asked, using my given name as he always did in moments of concern. I laid the ledger on his desk and pointed at the entries. "She's been siphoning funds, and I think she's been tampering with operations." Stefano ran a hand through his thinning hair. "Any proof beyond these vague entries?" "I have suspicions," I said, "but I need evidence." I described how she closed the well, how Marco had hinted at odd deliveries, how entire rows had died without explanation. He nodded slowly. "You'll need hard proof, bank transfers, emails, shipping records. And if she's having an affair, that could bolster your case." I felt a dark thrill at the idea. Before, I'd clung to our marriage as my final sanctuary. Now, betrayal burned a bright fire in my chest. "What about the vineyard?" I asked. "If I file for divorce, she could claim half." He leaned in, eyes sharp. "The prenuptial protects you, unless she can prove you concealed assets. She's relying on your fear. Gather every shred of evidence, bank statements, witness testimony, even her personal phone records if you can get them. We'll build a rock-solid case." He paused. "And Luca, be careful. Don't confront her directly until you're ready. She'll cover her tracks if she senses you close to the truth." I nodded, gratitude mingling with grim resolve. As I left, espresso long gone cold, I realized the vineyard itself had become a battlefield. The next morning, I summoned Marco to my office overlooking the central courtyard. He arrived wearing his usual work clothes, mask of professionalism up, but I saw the tension in his shoulders. "Marco," I began, "have you noticed anything unusual recently? Deliveries at odd hours? Unknown technicians?" He hesitated, then exhaled. "I don't trust to lie to you, signore. 2 nights ago, I saw a black van pull up at midnight. No paperwork. A man in a hooded jacket unloaded a crate into the storage barn. Did you get a look at him? He shook his head. No. But the crate was marked lab equipment. Then the next day, that section of vines was watered less. I thought it was an oversight. I absorbed every detail. Thank you. Keep this to yourself for now. When he left, I felt like a general spying on the enemy lines. That afternoon, I hacked into the Ledger's online portal, my old college hobby, and traced the private testing funds to a shell lab in the next county. The lab's website was minimal. No contact emails, a P.O. box in a deserted industrial park. But I found fingerprints on the lab reports, Marina's digital hash. Later, I confronted her as she walked the vines in the golden hour. The light haloed her hair, but I felt no beauty. Marina, I said, voice cold, why did you hire that lab? She stopped, expression bland. Quality control, she replied. You wanted better grapes. Without telling me? She offered me that practiced smile. You were busy. I handled it. I stared at her, disbelieving. The lab is unlicensed. Its tests show massive pesticide levels. She opened her mouth, but no words came. I pressed on. You're slowly killing the vines and siphoning money from our accounts. Why? Her head snapped back, pain and anger flashing in her eyes. You think I'm poisoning everything? You think I'd betray you? I felt a feral surge in my chest. I caught the shipments. The funds. Marco's testimony. The lab reports. Explain. She looked away, chin trembling. Then she turned back, face defiant. Yes. I betrayed you. You were always so obsessed with this place. You neglected me. Tears welled in her eyes, but the anger overrode them. This vineyard isn't yours alone. You never cared that I stood by you, helped you manage it. I deserve my share. You waited until you could control the finances. I spat. You built up a stake. You've been planning to divorce me and sell it off. Then let me, she hissed. I'll take my half and end this charade. I felt something inside me crack. Not if I can help it. I turned and walked away, boots crunching on the gravel, the vines whispering behind me. I spent the following weeks in ruthless focus. Every evening, I sat in my study with Stefano. We reviewed bank statements, forged signatures, false invoices. We subpoenaed Marina's phone records. Each page we added to the file pile bricks of undeniable proof at her feet. I also petitioned to freeze any sale of the vineyard. The family community was aghast. Rumors flew that I was mad, that I'd lost my senses over a jealous whim. But when I presented the court with the Shell Lab contracts, the unauthorized transactions, and the covert shipments of agrochemicals, the judge froze all assets pending trial. Marina's allies pleaded with me to settle, to avoid a public spectacle. But I wanted everyone to see the truth. I wanted to protect the vines, and the memories, and the promise I'd made to my grandfather. Every Monday morning, I walked the vineyard rows, feeling the earth underfoot, alive with a pulse of possibility. The day of the hearing, the courthouse thrummed with anticipation. Family members, neighbors, even a local reporter were there. Marina entered in a tailored suit, expression steely. I sat beside Stefano, the file of evidence balanced on his lap. I wore my father's old suit, the one he'd worn when drafting the deed in 1953. It felt like armor. When the judge called the case, Stefano laid out our argument, a detailed chronology of the sabotage, from the salted wells to the falsified lab tests, from the shell company invoices to the diverted payroll. He called Marco as a witness. The foreman's steady testimony clinched the operational sabotage. A forensic accountant traced the money flows. Marina's digital signature on the lab contract proved collusion. Then came the phone records. late-night calls to her lover, whose name surfaced in shipping logs. Marina's face paled. She tried to rebut, claiming innocence, professing love, appealing to emotions. But the court saw the mountain of proof. When the judge finally issued the ruling, Marina's plans unraveled. The court voided any right she had to profit from the vineyard sale, citing her willful misconduct and fraud. Instead, she received a modest alimony, far less than half the vineyard's worth, while the property remained secure under his legal guardianship. As I left the courthouse, the sun broke through the gray sky. I felt a lightness I hadn't known in months. The vines would live. Our legacy would endure. But it wasn't victory in the usual sense. It was the quiet triumph of truth, of fidelity to the land, and of protecting what matters most. I returned to the vineyard that afternoon and walked through the rows, touching the leaves as though greeting old friends. The workers stood at ease, nodding as I passed. Marco caught my eye and gave me a small, respectful smile. I nodded back, gratitude swelling in my chest. In the vineyard's heart, beneath a twisted, ancient vine, I knelt and pressed my hand into the soil. It felt rich and alive, ready for spring's new growth. My grandfather's spirit must be smiling somewhere. I raised my face to the sky and let a single tear slip, not of sorrow, but of relief. My wife's betrayal had felt like a poison. But in exposing it, I distilled the pure essence of what truly mattered. The vineyard was more than vines and barrels. It was family, history, and the quiet promise of tomorrow's fruit. And I would fight for it, rain or shine, for every sunrise that draped those rows in dew and hope.